Hello. Um, I thought that I'd do some sort of a vlog series, um, trying to offer some content and help to the people who are learning Finnish as a third language. So the most uh, obvious group of people for whom that would applies the people who come into Finland as immigrants, and they are most likely either studying Finnish independently or alternatively they're just taking some Finnish classes that the immigration officials are directing them towards. And I suppose it's some people think that Finnish is a challenging language just in and of itself, but then there's the added difficulty that you know for instance, I studied English in school, and I was given several years to just ease into the language. So there wasn't any kind of situation where I had to, jump into the deep end and immediately support myself uh, with my language skills. So it was made easier learning it just gradually with no pressure. And then also, some people might argue that it's easier to learn a language during your formative years rather than when you're, say, already uh, of an advanced age, uh, trying to sort of reset your life and pick up a completely different kind of language. There's a couple of other things as well in that you know uh, Finnish Finnish might be made a bit more difficult for some students because of some of the peculiarities of the Finnish language, in that learning a Romance language like Italian or Spanish, it's uh, like it might be easier for some people because we are partly familiar with some of the root words, say, that have been assimilated to other languages, and then with say the Germanic languages like uh, Swedish, for instance, it more or less follows the like it's not that difficult for people who speak English. Maybe, well, I suppose I can't judge the difficulty levels for for foreign students, but the Finnish language comes from what they call the Fenno-Ugrian language group. So it's basically the Hungarian language, the Finnish language, and then some really rare languages spoken in uh, northwest Russian by some tribes. Uh, I don't know if the Estonian language would be counted as part of that. It sounds very much like Finnish, or the Estonian and Finnish language sound like sort of like this kind of bizarre versions of each other. So like you see some similarities there, but anyway, like these are definitely Finnish is definitely a language where if you're like studying French, so many French words have been appropriated to English, so that if there's a French term like um, say agent de police, even if you've never studied French for a second in your life, you can sort of guess what a term like agent de police means. Uh, so, in the French language, there's like an easier landing to it. But even though the Finnish language has some loan words integrated to the language, like poliisi, which is Finnish for police, um, because of that Fenno-Ugrian thing, the oldest Finnish words are, very, very far apart from the other languages. So, whether people have a familiarity as a native language or other second language to the Germanic or the Latin-based Romance languages, Finnish must seem very exotic and perhaps to students a very frustrating, a frustrating experience initially, because there isn't that kind of common ground where, at first glance, maybe English and French sound very far apart, but, it's still comparatively an easier landing. Like, you'd have to study something like Chinese to realize what it is that a language is actually far apart from say English. So, French isn't so bad. Like, you have some kind of rapport with it from the get-go, and perhaps Finnish would feel like just as strange an experience as studying Chinese to some people, but I would hope to make it an easier experience if I could just help in some way with these videos. But anyway, I just want to say before I go further, in that the design in these videos is very much my idea is that a student that a viewer is already studying Finnish with material that is away from these videos, so that you would either have the kind of self-help language course, whether it's a textbook, the kind of Finnish for beginners textbook, or whether it's you studying Finnish at a school course, or whether you're studying Finnish with some other, say, online program. But anyway, the idea is that I'll just give like a different perspective to the language that some other, say, a teacher wouldn't have. So that I'll just give support rather than present any, holistic gateway to mastering the language. with these videos, so that because I'm not doing this professionally, and some people are, employed full time trying to help people learn Finnish as a third language, because those kinds of things are already made available one way or another. Perhaps they aren't made the world isn't full of Finnish for beginners courses, but you can, if you absolutely have to get those, you can get them from somewhere. So my mentality with this is just to offer sort of reinforcement rather than try to present absolutely everything, because my whole idea of learning a language is that I think that you need three things to pick up a foreign language. The first one is that you have to pick up the unique characteristic of pronouncing a foreign language, so that the French language is spoken in one manner, the Chinese language is spoken in one manner, and the Finnish language is spoken in one manner, and my younger brother, he studies Japanese, or he minors in Japanese studies in university, and he's always making fun of how it is that Americans say Japanese words, because Americans look at a Japanese word and then speak it as if it was an American word. So they have that kind of American flavor to Japanese words, and it's just showing a certain unwillingness to pick up on the unique tonal values of a different language. And lots of people who speak Finnish as a second or a third language, I'd say that most of them either are unwilling or unable to speak Finnish the way Finnish people speak, and that they accept that kind of mangled Finnish, so that depending on, like, it's more than just having an accent. Like so if I start speaking English with a French accent, oui, bien sûr, so I am of course sounding very French right now, but so I am still making myself understood, more or less. So this is just sounding a bit peculiar. But then there comes a point where, you're not just like that sample of English with a French accent. That's still, like, I wasn't mangling any words, but there comes a point where your accent becomes so rough that it basically starts turning it into incomprehensible. Like if we take an example of a Finnish word like maanantai, which is Finnish for Monday. Some people who refuse to learn to pronounce Finnish correctly instead of saying maanantai, they say something like meinentei, and then we start entering the kind of situation where you cannot make yourself understood because you just can't, like, the way you speak the language is so broken that no one can understand what you're saying. So that even if, for the sake of argument, let's say that you'd be perfectly fluent in Finnish, except that you can't pronounce it, if the point of language is that you'll be able to communicate with other people, like, your perfect fluency will be all for naught because Finnish people just cannot understand what it is that you try to say when you're speaking or doing something at main and te. Because, like, to you, maybe, like, when you look at how the word maanantai is spelled, you think that it should become something like main and te, but really, it's just like, for foreigners, maybe you overestimate how close you get to the original. You know, I can only offer a native person's viewpoint in that if I were to judge whether meinentei gets close enough to maanantai, I would say that you you at least constantly risk being understood by native speakers if you have not just an accent but just a completely willful negligence towards speaking the language properly. So that you know, to me it's not a big deal. Like, you know, Finnish people aren't like the French. Finnish people, I think, are by and large very supportive of anyone who makes the attempt at speaking Finnish. And, like, if you speak it in a really rough manner, Finnish people don't give you a hard time as such. So, like, I think that there's, you know, Finnish people, they have a lot of willpower to meet you halfway, and, you know, some people would say that the French maybe are a bit more demanding of foreigners in that they think that French should be a global language and that any civilized person should be able to conduct themselves in their language. You know, it's one way of approaching the situation, but, you know, the Finnish people, they don't really have that kind of approach. They aren't indignant if somebody hasn't devoted themselves to extensive Finnish studies, but you know, it's just, to me, in certain languages, I suppose the thing is that if a language is very much removed from English, the way that Chinese, for instance, is, where you know, like, if you're speaking Mandarin, but you have a complete disregard to the tonal values of Chinese, you cannot make yourself understood. I'd say that the Finnish isn't quite so extreme an example, but I would still offer my viewpoint that for a student to be able to pronounce Finnish more or less correctly, I would say that that's 1/3 of your entire field of studies. So that I would personally make being able to pronounce Finnish into 1/3 of the overall journey. And to some people, they seem to have the kind of attitude that pronouncing words with polish, that's just something to do when you want to ultimately master, you know, so that you'll have it's just something that's for the people who like want to shine with the language and want to, you know, uh, want to go all the way. But to me, that's turning the situation upside down. In that, with with certain of the languages like Finnish and Chinese, you cannot like the you haven't begun your studies before you learn how to make yourself comprehensible, and pronouncing the syllables correctly is the most integral part of making yourself comprehensible. So that if there are the kind of students who think that pronouncing words with the same flavor that natives bring, that's just like the cherry on top of learning a language. Like I just want all students to drop that kind of mentality, that rather than thinking that you learn some words first, learn some grammar first, and then worry about saying the words right. To me, that's backwards. With some languages, you can get away with it. Like you can speak Spanish with the kind of Yankee accent, and get away with it. Even though my brother might make fun of the kind of Yankee accent with the Japanese, at least I can personally comprehend the words. Like it's not making yourself unintelligible. It's just it's just maybe turning everything into unintentionally funny when you like lay too much of an emphasis on certain syllables and you have like a strange rhythm to the language. But like in some languages, that's not a big deal. With Finnish, I'm saying that it is sort of a big deal if you can speak it right, because you have to worry about it at some point, and you don't. Well, if there's two alternatives, either that you begin your language studies by worrying about pronouncing it correctly. Either you start by worrying it and you deal with it, and then when it's dealt with, you don't have to worry about it ever again. But if you just don't start by worrying about pronouncing Finnish correctly, then you basically like build yourself a broken motor, and then at every subsequent step of the way you have to worry about readjusting your broken settings when you actually have to speak with people. To prevent situations like that is why I would be so insistent that pronouncing the language correctly is the first worry. Then the second thing is that you have to have a vocabulary, so that you can communicate with people. You need the kind of building blocks of the language, and the most obvious building blocks are the words. So you need to be able to amass a vocabulary for yourself, and um, I will obviously offer certain packages of words in these videos, but the reason why I said that I'd rather have this just be support of different language programs is because I can't give you every word that you will need. I'll give sample words and uh, different words here and there, but you really have to increase your vocabulary from some source other than mine. So I'm just putting it out there, but uh, like to me, the two big uh, fields that have to be tackled with when learning language, to me in that order would be that first you worry about learning to pronounce it correctly, second you worry about picking up the words you want to use in sentences, and then the third would be that you worry about the grammar rules and the conjugation of words, so that you'll be able to take the raw material of words and to adjust it into meaning exactly what you want to mean. So anyway, I can obviously I think that with the pronunciation, I can offer pretty much all the tools that you'll need to get that right. And then with the second group, the words, I can give some words, some sentences that you'll be able to use, but with that you will have, like, if you genuinely are serious about becoming fluent in Finnish, you must get most of your vocabulary from some other platform. So whether you'll buy a textbook, whether you'll buy a dictionary, whether you'll get them through an online dictionary, I don't know. But that's something that you'll have to arrange for yourself. And then with the grammar rules, I can offer some tools and explain some things that may be left a bit vague for a beginning student. But again, if a person is serious about becoming fluent in Finnish, they should definitely get some other material as well. So people in recent years have taken it for granted that the so-called 10,000 hour rule for excellence is how it is, that if you want to master a foreign language, for instance, that you would have to put some significant amount of hours, like 10,000, into it. I don't know what the truth is, but let's say that I certainly will not make 10,000 hours worth of videos for people enthusiastic about the Finnish language. So that it just goes without saying that you won't become fluent in Finnish after merely watching whatever videos I will do, because it takes it takes a significant amount of repetitions for words to uh, make the transition from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So that I would recommend a certain cyclical model for all students, in that uh, you don't make uh, unrealistic goals for yourself. You know, you don't think that you have to you know there's this saying that you should be quick but you shouldn't hurry. So perhaps some students will have that kind of mentality. If you think that you're being reasonable and you think that you're being realistic and that you want to be quick but you don't want to hurry. But I'm sort of saying that you shouldn't even really try to be quick. You should try to um, make significant moves. And I think that anyone who tries to be quick really is like, you can't help but to hurry with a mentality like that. And if you try to be quick with your Finnish studies, I think that you aren't really thinking with a cyclical paradigm, so that you're only mindful of uh, you know getting to the next level. So you just want to get the present exercises out of the way quickly and then jump into the next, and ultimately you want to have the biggest efforts with the least amount of work. And that kind of mentality, I think, ultimately is you having uh, certain priorities in your life, and learning this foreign language has been judged by you as a pretty uh, trivial entity. So that if you don't take that kind of cyclical route, if you don't just if you don't accept the process for its own sake, if you don't want to make a foreign language a big part of your life, you very likely won't ever make significant strides in it. So I don't want to burst anyone's bubble and to say that if you just want to learn a few things quickly, that 5 years later nothing will have lodged itself into your long-term memory. Like, I want a prospective student and me as like an amateur tutor. I want us to be on the same page in that in this uh, in this age where everything moves in the information stream at breakneck speed, and everything that's 5 minutes old might just well be ancient history. I just I don't plan on being any part of that. So anyway, you can think of me as being old school, and I believe that if students are serious about learning a foreign language, the only way to really do it is to invest a significant amount of hours into it, and the main mode of going about investing those hours is to go about it cyclically. And why you do that is that if you just in a zombie-like manner read words from some list that, for instance, you read the Finnish weekdays, maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, perjantai, lauantai, sunnuntai. The wrong way of doing it cyclically is that you'll just say, take an isolated moment and just keep reading them maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, perjantai, lauantai, sunnuntai, maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, perjantai, lauantai, sunnuntai. Because there's such a thing that when the psychology of learning is taken into consideration, is that you sort of become blind to the text when you just keep repeating it like that, and you're thinking that it has firmly lodged itself into your memory, and you sort of overestimate the impact it's making, because whatever impact it's doing, it's on your short-term memory, not on your long-term memory. So that I'd say that the right way of going about it cyclically is that let's say that you break down learning a language into stages, so that there's the beginner stage, there's the what do they call it, the intermediary or something like that stage, and then there's the advanced stage. And to me, the right kind of cyclically is that with the beginner's course, you earmark certain portions of the language as being part of the beginner's course. So that, let's say that there's this really basic units of language, like the numbers, the weekdays, the months, certain basic verbs like to be, to have. You learn the personal pronouns. You learn the names of countries, learn the names of languages, nationalities, certain things like that. And to me, the right way of going cyclically is that you'll break that beginner's course into portions and say that one day you're studying the verbs, then you're studying certain nouns. Let's say that you'll go over the numbers. And then, to me, the cyclical mentality is that then after you've gone through that mini cycle, you'll return to the beginning. So that, you began studying some verbs, then some nouns, then the numbers. And then rather than go forward, you go back. And you go back and you see whether you've actually learned the verbs, whether you've actually learned the nouns, and whether you've actually learned the numbers. And the way to test this, if they've entered your long-term memory. And the way to test it, whether they've entered your long-term memory, is it's easy if you're just reading the Finnish lists of maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, perjantai, lauantai, sunnuntai. It's easy to just read those and then to remember that, oh yeah, that's how that list sounds, maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, perjantai, lauantai, sunnuntai. But the way to really test your long-term memory is to see whether you remember what Thursday is in Finnish. So don't look at the text. Don't look. Don't give yourself the answer, but really think whether you can remember. So, to me, that kind of festina lente, to hasten slowly approach is the right way of going about it. I said that it's the old school mentality. I don't know what others will think of it, but it's just what, like, if I would be like your tutor, it's how I'd recommend you going about it. And that if your own mentality is completely different, that's fine, but you cannot expect me to go along with your different mentality. I'm telling you right now that I won't do that, and that my whole assumption for you is that you will take that cyclical approach, that you won't just read the numbers once, you won't just give like one weekend for reading the numbers, but that you'll keep reading them as long as you need to, for them to be part of your long-term memory. And then when you can, give like this no delay answers when I ask you what is number 35 in Finnish, what is number 571 in Finnish, when you can just when you can reach into your long-term memory and give the answers, then you can move on to the next stage, and you can abandon the first cycle, because if when you start advancing, the numbers will still be there, the weekdays will still be there, and you'll have them as part of your cycle of learning the language, so that I won't do the repetitions for you. I won't every 5 minutes read the weekdays, read some verbs. Like you'll have to do those repetitions yourself. I will, most of the times I'll say things once and then expect that you'll independently work the right cycle for you. So I'm just saying that is part of the overall design for this. How slowly, how quickly you want to move on from one area of learning to the next. It's up to you, but you should. My recommendation is that you don't move forward until you remember the answers to the first area that is being learned. But anyway, I just thought that I'd make this introductory video trying to just give my mentality for these things. So anyway, as I said, I believe that the 3 different levels of learning Finnish are: first, the pronunciation; second, the vocabulary; and third, the grammar. And I will try my best to give a sufficient amount of tools for anyone interested in learning the language during the course of this vlog series. So anyway, if anyone is interested in this, I hope I'll be able to those textbooks, they can be a bit dry and narrow as an experience, so that the reason why I said that I give support to those is that I try to be the opposite of the experience of just looking at some some word lists in a book, so that you have the slightly more alive version of a language in here. But anyway, that should more or less wrap things up for this introduction, and I'll go and think about what the first videos about the pronunciation should be. But anyway, that was all for now, and I'll hope I'll see you at some of the other videos as well. But anyway, bye for now.